World Development System. Chapter 41. Diana saw this tone from Vlad for the first in many months. He usually only applied this tone for his comrades or Duke himself when he was talking about his past. From Diana's point of view, John had already become one of Vlad's favorites. It might be because of his abilities or talent or business, or it could be a combination of everything. Meanwhile, after some time, Diana's maid Maurice prepared a grilled jerk chicken with salads. This was one of the recipes which John had shared at Steve's house earlier, and from there they got it over here. Who knew we could use these spices in another way and make our food more tasteful? Good food, Maurice. Well, John really is an interesting guy. We got to see a lot of new things after making his acquaintance. Maurice was quite happy after perfecting the recipe and getting praised by Diana. That's certainly true, Princess. We even got to learn so many new recipes and make food in new ways. While Vlad only nodded a bit, which couldn't even be seen. Vlad did so instinctively as he always liked to maintain his composure. But Diana still noticed it. She only smiled and didn't ruin it for Vlad. While Vlad could only see her act haughtily. Okay, send this recipe to Dad and others in the family. I think they will certainly like it. What do you guys think? Maurice, I am sure Sire and Madam would love it. We should send them this recipe without wasting any moment. Vlad replied, well, it depends, but I think it is an okay dish. Usually, Vlad wouldn't comment on the dish and simply shake his head in disappointment when he was not satisfied with a certain dish. However, today it was quite surprising that Vlad had a good opinion on food. It was only during royal banquets or the chief chef of their mansion who got face from Vlad when it came to an appraisal of food. Meanwhile, Vlad bought a sketch of John's mansion from one of his documents and showed it to Diana's. He showed this sketch as he found this architecture quite interesting. This sketch was made by one of the traveling artists who recently visited the North Frontier town. Initially, the artist wanted to make a sketch of animals and birds in the wild, but after he saw the mansion, he changed his mind and decided to make a sketch of John's mansion. Vlad got this sketch via one of his informants as he had decided to get full information on John, and hence he got to know about John's mansion. Young miss, as you had requested earlier, we investigated John a bit more and got to know about his recently built mansion. What do you think about this architecture? From our information, this mansion was personally designed by John and implemented by one of the woodworkers from North Frontier town. Recently, they have also started selling various types of new furniture which have become famous among merchants of North Frontier town and their nearby villages. Diana thought for a while and gave her thoughts about the mansion after looking at the sketch. Quite unique. I think we made a good investment this time around. Just from looking at this sketch I can imagine the amount of effort required to make this mansion possible. Maybe he wouldn't have required a lot of effort because of his talents, but this is nonetheless a very good work of art. Vlad smiled and said in a teasing tone to Diana, sure enough, top architects from around the world would have charged humongous prices for this type of palace to be built. It seems your instinct really got us lucky this time around. This time Vlad was really complimenting her, but he still had his sadist smile on his face. In the royal heavenly palace of the imperial city, one of the servants of the royal palace was waiting for Her Majesty as he was going to be rewarded by her. You did quite well in finding these rose soaps. Nowadays His Majesty is quite happy, and I feel it is because of these soaps which are having a good effect on my skin, as well as it creates a good atmosphere because of smell. As the women were always competing for His Majesty Lionheart's attention, all of her wives competed with each other and tried a lot of things. This time it was Cecilia who was rewarding a servant for his work. Cecilia asked the servant, before going, tell me, from where did you get these soaps? After getting his bag full of gold, servant answered her hastily, Her Majesty, it was one of the caravans of Morgan family which reached capital to trade their goods. As I was pretty close to one of the dealers, I got this soap earlier than others. It is rumored that Marquis Ray is one of the backers of rose soap in the southern domain. This servant knew that it was inside information which mattered when he was dealing with her, and hence answered her questions. He also told me that it was Joseph Morgan who stuck the deal with the creator these soaps, and this didn't lack truth, as recently Joseph got more attention and resources for his trade in the north from his family. Cecilia thought and made a decision while she gave her orders to the servant. Make sure you delay this news as much as possible in the palace. If that guy from Morgan family wants to sell all of his goods, then tell him to contact us. We can anyway resell them if we bought them in plenty. The servant then saluted and took her orders. As you wish, Her Highness. Inside a very luxurious room, His Highness Lionheart as well was pretty much pleased with rose soaps he used after bathing for a few days. Today, before going to the courtroom, he asked his butler, "What do you think about these new soaps which are quite popular among the aristocratic circles nowadays?" Chapter 42. Inside a very luxurious room, His Highness Lionheart as well was pretty much pleased with rose soaps he used after bathing for a few days. Today, before going to the courtroom, he asked his butler, "What do you think about these new soaps which are quite popular among the aristocratic circles nowadays?" Butler replied, "Quite unique, and they are of better quality from the previous ones which were made by other nobles and merchants. From our information, it is being made by a commoner of the North Frontier town in the northern domain of Baron Mendez." King thought and remarked after hearing about some of the information relating to these soaps, "North Frontier town, so that's the case. Anyway, keep a watch on them and try to keep a neutral position of the royal family in the front, and if there is a chance to snatch the soap making techniques, then do it covertly. We are anyway running low on finances because of all the yearly wars and maintenance of all our industries and priorities." Meanwhile, on John's end, today they were preparing to leave Pearl City and visit Dolores, while Tom the slave dealer was preparing to send all the slaves to the port for their transportation. Transportation of slaves this time was handled by Eric. Joseph had already given him explicit instructions about the treatment and lodging of slaves which would be required at North Frontier town. John, Joseph, and others meanwhile headed north of Pearl City by land and decided to travel towards Dolores City for their negotiations with Baron Mendez for the sale of North Frontier town. One of the guard order of Marquis Ray had also escorted them to Dolores City, of which some 50-odd people would follow John to North Frontier town to help and train other people for the protection of his domain, while others would leave after reaching Dolores. The night order was headed by a man named Alan Lopez. During these 5 days of travel, they bypassed the Imperial City, where they only stayed for a day before leaving for Dolores in the northern domain. During their stay at the Imperial City, Sally was quite upset and had an irritating mood. While Eva too didn't like Imperial City because she would have to face her relatives here if she stayed any longer, and that was also one of the reasons why they didn't stay for long at the Imperial City. After a few days, they reached Dolores without any problems. This time Baron Mendez knew that Joseph and others were going to visit him and talk about the agreement on the sale of North Frontier town, which the Morgan family talked about earlier. As a noble, he couldn't lower himself to visit John and others even if he knew that a big piece of meat was coming his way. So this time it was one of the servants who went to receive them. The servant was quite surprised after watching the 50 knights of Marquis Ray which were traveling with John and Joseph. The remaining knights already left after reaching Dolores. This was also one of the moves by which Marquis Ray intended to show his support for John to Baron Mendez and others who were aiming for John and his business. From this, he intended to show everyone that anyone moving against John was as good as moving against him, as it would harm his interests. Most of the people in the political circles would have already come to the conclusion that John and Marquis Ray have reached an agreement that would benefit both sides. Because most people tracking those soaps and John already knew about Joseph and John's meeting with Marquis Ray when they visited Pearl City. They also got hints from the behavior of Tom on how he treated John after his meeting with Marquis. The scene of knights marching in the city was quite a sight for most of the people in Dolores. Many people thought some noble had arrived today, but after watching Baron Mendez's servant, everyone concluded that some rich merchant or son of a noble arrived here today. After some shock, the servant headed towards John and others. After some talk, they decided to head towards the mansion prepared by Baron Mendez. After waiting for an hour, Baron Mendez came to the room where Joseph and John were staying. Joseph and John had already expected to wait for a long time when they arrived today to seal the deal between them. As Baron Mendez was in a superior position of the negotiation table, so they already expected such an outcome because they were the ones who proposed to buy the town. Baron Mendez was a middle-aged man who looked in his 40s-50s, he had brown hair, a burly body, and a height of 5 feet 9 inches, he was wearing luxurious and imposing clothes. He wore imposing clothes intentionally for their meeting today so that he could squeeze as much as possible from John and Joseph. Meanwhile, Diana and her entourage headed towards North Frontier City after they finished their business and tour in Pearl City. During her journey, she got various reports from Vlad and Maurice. During this time she was quite accustomed to food recipes of John, which was always by prepared Maurice. Vlad too took a liking towards these recipes. Vlad meanwhile always gave her reports from her domain and all the matters which concerned her. One of the reasons Diana was traveling Elias Kingdom was because she was fleeing the various suitors who were pursuing her in Fire Abyss Kingdom. This included one of the princes of Fire Abyss Kingdom. To keep the face of the royal family, she always kept traveling whenever she got reports that the prince was coming to the place she was staying. And so fleeing to other countries was always the best option for Diana, as princes can't travel to other countries easily as they would require very high security, which would cost a lot of money, and their lives would still be in danger. Because of this she also became to be known for her adventurous and exploring spirit. Chapter 43. However, this time around it was because of her curiosity in John and his companions that she decided to visit North Frontier Town and see how things changed firsthand in North Frontier Town. This time at Baron Francis Mendez's manor. Baron Mendez came along with Antonio's butler James and his second son Antonio. Baron Mendez had spent quite a sum to recuperate his son earlier so that he could become a better knight in the future, and there are injuries which could affect him later on, while also for their meeting with John and Joseph, which was going to take place today. As soon as both Antonio and John met, their eyes only had cold looks for each other. Both Joseph and Baron Francis were watching the show from the sidelines. Meanwhile, the butler James was keeping a watch on Joseph. John greeted Antonio with a sarcastic tone and a smiling face. "Nice meeting you again, Lord Antonio. It seems you have recovered quite well from your injuries. I hope we can have a blood-pumping duel like the one we had in East Sea City again in the future." Antonio didn't reply but stared at him with an angry expression. To remove the awkwardness of the conversation, Joseph came forward and suggested that everyone relax a bit. "Why don't we relax a bit and have a taste of some unique cuisines which were specially prepared by our chefs this time? They have also been praised by Marquis Ray and Marchioness Aine, so how about everyone grabs a bite of it?" Joseph knew that such a type of situation would arise, and he had already planned a lot to complete this deal, and he also had expected John to react in the same way. Additionally, he didn't want John to bend in front of Baron, as this would totally mean that John was not cut off for handling a domain later on if he can't even handle such matters. From this encounter, it could be seen that Baron had prepared quite a lot when it came to confronting them and handling their business matters. After watching this encounter, Baron had decided to move towards the main business. "That's quite true, Joseph. Okay, let's head towards the dining room first and discuss business while we have dinner." James led everyone to the dining hall while Joseph ordered one of his men to bring the dishes which were already prepared. While Eva and others were busy touring the city today, and she also didn't want to interact more with Antonio, so they had decided to go to a hotel to avoid him and later watch the city at their own leisure. Dolores was quite a beautiful city compared to North Frontier Town in a sense that there were more merchants, and this place was one of the transit hubs as it interconnected a lot of other cities in the northern domain. This was also one of the reasons why it was the main capital of ancestors of Baron Mendez. While they were traveling today, Eva and her group today saw George, who was conversing with one of the blacksmiths in Dolores. Today he had come to deliver one of the batches of his weapons which were made recently. Every time, he was the one who escorted the weapons and armor made by his shop to Baron Mendez, as this would ensure that no one steals them, and he would also get a chance to get acquainted with other nobles for bigger business if they visited Baron on any given day. "Hey, isn't that George from our town? What's he doing here today?" Josephine recognized him and asked others with a curious tone. Like most of the time, she was always ignorant when it came to nobility. Jay then explained to her, Well, from what I know, he always personally supplies Baron with his weapons and armors produced in his shop for their night order. You should know that the nobles always try to earn more merits in war and hence raise their social position by achieving merits in war. And the same is the case for other sons of nobles who at least try to get a chance to become important officials in the imperial city. And so weapon makers are always important to nobles, and so are nobles important to weapon makers. You might have known about the Lore family, who became aristocrats a long time ago and now they are personal weapon makers of the royal family. So most of the blacksmiths try to emulate the achievements of the Lore family. Eva also added bits of her own information when the topic of blacksmiths and the Lore family came up. That's true. Also, from what I heard from Grandma, they are said to be providing weapons for the spies of the royal family, so they have earned quite an important position in the imperial palace. As far as rumors go by in the imperial palace, it is believed that the royal family gave the Lore family two choices after they became famous and too strong because of their weapon making. 1. They become personal weapon makers of the royal family, or 2. The royal family would forcefully extract their weapon making techniques and silence them if necessary. However, second option was not said but was only implied by many in their family after the royal family tried to hire them. After considering the pros and cons, their elders had decided to become personal weapon makers of the royal family, as this would improve their social status, but they could also avoid a disaster. For their family, it was a joyous occasion, as most people didn't know the cost of declining the royal family's offer. Although the Lore family was quite strong during those times as well, however, they may not have enough strength if it came to a rebellion, and they already made quite a lot of enemies internally while their dominion wasn't close to any border. However, my grandma only heard it from the gossip of those old men in the court, which usually took place. So this can't be confirmed yet. My grandma is one of those believers of this story, while there is a group that says it is a rumor to malign to the royal family. However, this gossip only takes place between those strong men privately in court, and most of the time there is a gag order when it comes to this gossip. Additionally, Lore family always said privately that they were never forced by the royal family, so not many can confirm this gossip even if it is true. All of the people here knew about Grandma Melanie being a court official in her day, so they weren't shocked by this revelation. However, all of them got a new perspective on the royal family and understood one of the reasons why Grandma Melanie lived here away from the politics of the imperial palace and was spending her days in rest, experimentation, and leisure here in North Frontier Town. While guiding Eva in potion making, but as she found her interest as a fire magician, she started finding a capable disciple who can inherit her legacy in potion making, and now she can see that exactly in John, or maybe he would go even higher than her and make a bigger name than her in the future. Chapter 44. All of the people here knew about Grandma Melanie being a court official in her day, so they weren't shocked by this revelation. However, all of them got a new perspective on the royal family and understood one of the reasons why Grandma Melanie lived here away from the politics of the imperial palace and was spending her days in rest, experimentation, and leisure here in North Frontier Town. While guiding Eva in potion making, but as she found her interest as a fire magician, she started finding a capable disciple who can inherit her legacy in potion making, and now she can see that exactly in John, or maybe he would go even higher than her and make a bigger name than her in the future. Meanwhile, during the dinner at the mansion of Baron Mendez, Joseph was the one kept the mood alive of all the people in the dining room. Baron Mendez was quite surprised with the food he tasted this time around. He had heard a lot of rumors that about the food served by servants of John and Joseph, but he thought they were nothing special. It was only now that he felt that food today was quite good compared to the ones made by chefs at his mansion. He had thought of taking a shot at them if the food wasn't good enough, but it seemed that the rumors among aristocratic circles were quite right, and earlier thought that Marquis Ray was only giving them face because of their deal. So after tasting the dishes, he decided against ridiculing them but genuinely praised their dishes. It seems that the rumors were quite true about your dishes and chefs among the aristocratic circles, Baron remarked after eating the dishes. While it seemed that Antonio also toned down his cold stare quite a bit after eating some delicious food. It was because he was quite surprised after making his first bite on the food. As a noble, He had eaten quite a variety of delicacies in Elias' kingdom, so he thought it would be just like those normal dishes he often ate, but this time he was quite surprised, and hence the surprised reaction. Watching that the mood of both Antonio and Baron Mendez softened a bit, he decided to start the main topic this time around after a bit of light talk. Haha, no, we were just lucky to across these new dishes, and so we decided to share it with others. Actually, it was John who made this dish and told their recipes to his servants, which were also transferred to my chefs. Joseph replied while laughing. Baron was skeptical a bit and smiled, but he neither agreed nor did he disagree with Joseph. While Antonio and James were watching the show from the sidelines. Last time I heard, you guys pretty much injured Antonio in the duel for 2 months. If it wasn't for the doctors or using precious herbs, Antonio still would be on his bed. How do you plan to explain to me about the previous incident? As expected, Baron had intended to use the previous incident to jack up the prices and put pressure on them. Well, I think it was only a duel, and as you know, in most of the duels some will get injured and some won't. How about this? We will pay for the road maintenance charges which would incur to us as compensation for the previous incident. John and Joseph were already prepared for the jacking up of prices, and hence they decided to use road maintenance as one of the chips. The thing was, they were anyways going to unilaterally maintain the roads, and hence John proposed this idea to Joseph earlier, who in turn proposed to Baron here. Baron thought this would be better for his dominion, as this would reduce his costs. He also made sure that John pays for road maintenance later on, even if John doesn't own the land later on. However, you have to make sure that you pay for road maintenance in the future even if you don't own North Frontier Town later on, and if you fail to do so, then your soap factory will become collateral against it. This was Baron's main aim the time during their negotiations. Joseph thought for a bit and didn't agree to it, but later made a counter-proposal. The new proposal included, as long as John owned North Frontier Town he would maintain maintenance for free, but in case he loses the land then he will only pay for 10 years worth of road maintenance Indiana the future, and if he fails to do so then his soap factory can be used as a collateral against it. Okay, these terms are fine as well. After some thought, Baron agreed to these terms, as it was anyway a bonus for him since he got a buffer which would save his costs later on even if they managed to survive the beast attack. Later on, it was Joseph who handled the negotiations for buying North Frontier and an honorary noble title of Baron. The negotiations were quite hard, and it seemed that Baron knew that John was willing to pay a big price for the town, and hence he bet on playing hard during the negotiations. It was also because he knew that John wanted to finish the deal as fast as possible so that he can increase the defenses of North Frontier Town for preparations later on and save as many people as possible. Baron didn't try to push his luck much later on, but he knew this year's invasion of magic beasts would be more ferocious than the previous years. It was only when Baron reached their bottom line that he agreed to sell North Frontier Town at a price of 25,000 gold coins with an honorary noble title. Both the Baron and Antonio were quite happy with today's result, as they got a buffer zone, and this decreased their defense costs for the current year without any blame for the North Frontier Town. And if anything happens later on, it will be their responsibility. While they successfully managed to hide the fact that this year it was going to be harsher than any other years for North Frontier Town, they thanked their fortunes gleefully. However, they still didn't know that John was already prepared and knew about the attack. That's why he made a big risky bet this time to get a dominion. Meanwhile, Eric, on the other hand, reached East Seaport in the north and arranged all the lodgings and required supplies for all the slaves, and proceeded to transport the soaps which were newly ordered from the Rose factory. He already had orders from both Joseph and Frank about their treatment of slaves, mobilization of fleet, and importance of this trade route since a lot of people will try to target them later on. That was also why he got a bigger fleet and crew this time when they made their journey north this time around. After completing all the tasks, Eric was going to wait for Joseph and John for further instructions. During their journey this time around, he found Jake to be the most interesting person in the whole group of slaves. When he watched Jake, his eyes reflected deep sorrow and pain from his past. One of his mates, Sean, saw this and understood what he saw in Jake. He didn't bother Eric and let him be on his own. He was one of the guys who traveled with Eric from a long time ago, and he understood him the most. Chapter 45. Eric approached Jake and said to him with a smile and kind tone when Jake was training alone among the slaves, "If you hate your weakness, become strong enough to protect yourself and your loved ones." This was unlike Eric's unusual behavior previously, and it was the same old carefree and happy mood. However, these words were deep and contained practical experiences. While smoking in the bar, Eric was chatting with one of his mates. This time young master made quite a good deal and a friend. Our internal problems this time are also fixed by reports we are getting directly from one of those men, and this has decreased our cost on manpower and resources. That's true, but our problems have increased as well this time. But Captain, I bet you miss those beauties on board this time around, replied one of his mates after joking and laughing. Eric laughed and replied sheepishly in his usual carefree and joking tone, "Sure enough, but I am still a gentleman when it comes to treating women. I only peek at them for their safety so others don't have other malicious thoughts." After some light-hearted talk, Eric came to the main point and said in a serious tone, "From now on, all of you guys have to be more focused when we travel down south and up north. As far as compensation and wages go, you guys will be receiving 3 times more from now on, so there is something to cheer about. And for those who want to leave, they can leave as well." "What are you talking about, Captain? Since we have followed you on our journey in seas from a long time, there will always be problems of pirates when we travel in seas. It's good now that we can increase our base of operations and fleet. Let's enjoy ourselves since we will be getting paid 3 times more from now on," said his right-hand man, Sean, as he drank beer and said in a drunk mood, while others laughed and agreed to Sean. He was not a guy with a big build, but he was the one who always organized people during Eric's absence. The crew respected him because he had already proved himself in the past because of his firm decisions which changed a lot of outcomes for them. The serious talk ended in a happy mood because, as sailors, they always knew there will be problems when it comes to pirate attacks, so their lives were always in danger, and hence increase in wages was better for them anyway. Eric's aim was achieved as there was no commotion about the problems that were mentioned, and an increase in wages cheered up the mood for everyone. "It seems I made a good set of companions during the time we traveled the seas," Eric thought after watching their reaction. During this time Diana arrived at North Frontier Town. The first thing Diana did was to go to John's mansion and made her lodging at his mansion. The other problems were handled by Vlad as he met Eric and told him to explain the servants of the mansion, as Eric was familiar with people in mansion and factory. Eric knew about Vlad from Joseph before traveling, so he helped him explain the servants of the mansion about their identity. The servants in the mansion were quite nervous, but they still believed Eric as they already knew that he was Joseph's right-hand man. During this time, Vlad arranged the security of the mansion and guided servants for their work. He was also quite amazed by the ice house, which was made with the help of saltpeter as it was present in the mansion, but he didn't pry further for more details as he understood that they already crossed a lot of boundaries because of Diana's willfulness earlier, and so he hoped John and others ignore their behavior this time around. Meanwhile, at Baron's mansion, Baron used this opportunity to get as many recipes from Joseph's chef as he can get. He knew that Joseph and John are unable to reject him unless and until the deal was finalized and sealed. After dealing with the Baron for the whole day and giving him 25,000 gold coins, they signed the contract and planned to head on their way to North Frontier Town in the north after some rest. After signing their deal, John made a sigh of relief as he can now aggressively continue his plans after laying low for such a long time after arriving at Archon. After they left, they went to meet their companions and tell them about the good news. After they left Baron's mansion, one of Prince Hector's men came to Baron's mansion and sent them a letter. This letter was a reply to their request for the elite assassins which Antonio had asked for earlier. This letter was read by both Antonio and Baron Mendez. He already concluded that this letter was a positive one since Prince Hector had replied to them. If they weren't interested, then they would have not even bothered to write a reply letter to them. While George, who was in Dolores, he had already heard about the rumors of John buying North Frontier Town from the servants of the mansion after he delivered his weapons to Baron Mendez. Baron Mendez this time had asked him a lot about John and his factory this time around. From Baron's words, he understood that there was something going on behind the scenes, but he still remained cautious with his words, as he understood that John also got backing of some nobles and had earned an honorary baron's noble status. He also got to know that Baron had earlier planned to abandon North Frontier Town and had only told him about it so he doesn't get inflicted. Although George is quite selfish about some things, but he still clung to North Frontier Town because of his past and ancestors, or else he would have long ago settled in Dolores or some other big city, but he was still living in North Frontier Town because he felt free here and it reminded him of his past, but he still cared about life. His past had also changed him a lot, and that is why he became selfish as he got more experiences interacting with other people. Hearing this, he was quite mad. Usually, he wouldn't be mad unless a question of North Frontier Town's survival came into question, but he still hid it well when this was mentioned. He always tried to be sincere with people who were sincere with him, but when he was forced to choose a decision, he would always take decisions that harmed him the least and wait for an opportunity, and hence he was perceived as a selfish person many times by people. In the market at Dolores, John and Joseph met with their companions and told them about the good news that Baron Mendez had agreed to sell the town to them, and they got both the deeds. 1. North Frontier Town's deed. 2. Deed of Honorary Baron. Sally was quite skeptical about how the Baron so easily gave up the land, but she still understood that there were many benefits for him in throwing responsibility on John's head about the magic beast attacks and successfully creating a buffer between Forest and his domain while lowering his costs at the same time. Chapter 46. In the market at Dolores, John and Joseph met with their companions and told them about the good news that Baron Mendez had agreed to sell the town to them, and they got both the deeds. 1. North Frontier Town's deed. 2. Deed of Honorary Baron. Sally was quite skeptical about how the Baron so easily gave up the land, but she still understood that there were many benefits for him in throwing responsibility on John's head about the magic beast attacks and successfully creating a buffer between Forest and his domain while lowering his costs at the same time. However, after they heard the terms of the contract and price of the North Frontier Town, they understood why the Baron so easily sold the town to John. But they also knew how it was hard to maintain after buying a dominion. Usually, only knights were conferred lands after the war, but they would still have to clear the land of magical beasts and successfully bring people to their dominion. So raising a dominion cost a lot of money for new nobles who were granted fiefs, and they would still require enough strength to protect their dominion from other nobles and magical beasts, if present at the borders. Baron had bet that even if John receives help from Marquis Ray, they still would not be able to repel the magical beast attack this time because of their recent increase in volume. Additionally, it is very hard to recruit knights even if they are slaves. While if John wanted to train his knights, then it would require top-notch techniques as well as a few years' worth of training, so John neither had time on his side, neither did he have strength on his side to protect his fiefdom. While at the same time he would still require loyalty of the knights and magicians working under him if he had any. So Baron Mendez had considered a lot of things when he decided to sell the North Frontier Town to John. At Baron Mendez's home, after receiving the letter of Prince Hector, both Baron and Antonio understood that Prince Hector wasn't willing to directly interfere in this matter, but he still wanted to help them indirectly, and hence they accepted the invitation to the ball which Prince Hector intended to hold at his summer house in Imperial City. From this, they understood that it was this gathering where their plans will be made. This ball was going to be held 2 months later. While during the absence of John and others at his mansion, Vlad noticed a lot of things which occurred in North Frontier Town and understood why Grand W.D.S. Melanie took him in as one of her disciple. The most notable thing he observed was that the farmers and the villagers used fertilizers while working in the field, which was a very unfamiliar thing to him. After asking, he didn't get the answer at first. It was only later when he visited Grandma Melanie that he got the reason why the villagers were using fertilizers and doing the 4-crop rotation method. It was one of the experiments proposed by John to increase the yield of the soil. Vlad knew Grandma Melanie from a long time ago, as he was one of his frequent customers in the old days. Today, as he was already in the North Frontier Town, he had decided to visit her. He visited the pharmacy when there was no one, still experimenting like the previous old days. "What are you doing here? Are the assassins of Blucia family so free nowadays?" she asked him as she recognized him immediately. After watching Vlad here at the North Frontier town, she was very surprised and alerted because she knew that whenever Vlad visited a certain place there would be a mess from behind the scenes and he came for something important at that place, and that was also one of the reasons why she was very alert. You don't need to be so alert after watching me. Nowadays I am only working as a butler and bodyguard for Princess Diana. Since she decided to visit this village, I thought maybe I should visit my acquaintance from the past since I knew you were staying here. Do you really think I would have shown my face in public and you if I was going to do some secret mission over here? After observing him for some time, she concluded from his actions and tone that he wasn't here for anything, and it seemed he really came here because he was now a butler of the Princess of Blucia family. So she decided to let him in the pharmacy. Vlad sat down, sighed and said to her after watching her actions, "It seems that not staying in the Imperial City has dulled you for a long time." Melanie was quite straightforward and asked him about his intentions on visiting her. "I am sure you came here to about important things, not reminiscing about the past. I don't think you are the type of guy who will waste your time and visit me while you have a job to protect the mistress of Blucia family." Vlad smiled and said, straightforward as always, "Okay, I will come straight to the point. The thing is, when I visited this town, I noticed some different practices by farmers in the village, so I hoped you can explain those to me, and how were they different from normal practices and how it affected the growth of plants. Were these changes recommended by you? As you know, I always love to gather more information, so it would be better for me to have more information on these practices as well, even if they are unknown practices." Melanie thought for a while, understood some of his intentions and answered him vaguely, "Well, this is one of the theories of my disciple, John, and we are experimenting this theory on the farms since the farms already became barren and we anyway intended to cultivate new lands. After following these experiments, it has given us good results for now, though we are not sure on the other theories proposed for long-term yields. However, we are quite happy with the current situation, so we intend to continue with our current practices." Chapter 47. Though Vlad understood that she won't give straightforward answers, he still got something out of her. "Speaking of your great-granddaughter, we saw her when we were in Pearl City. Is your disciple the same guy who was traveling with her and acting as the leader?" "Speaking of him, our mistress this time took a liking to him and made a deal with him for supplying us the soaps he is making here in North Frontier Town, and hence our visit here. Personally, I find him as a very interesting guy. In all the years I sneaked on people, he was the only one who was able to sense me even when he was in a relaxed position. You got a good disciple this time around, unlike those from nobles in the past. Why don't you lend him to me for some time?" Meanwhile, our mistress this time insisted on living in his mansion. "I hope you don't misunderstand and make conclusions from it," Vlad spoke with a teasing smile. As Vlad revealed more, she understood why he came here today. "John doesn't need to learn anything from you, he is doing fine as a Podi-Oneer master. His first aim will be to become the greatest Podi-Oneer of all time and make both me and himself proud and create history on Arkan." Vlad listened and spoke to her in a grave tone. "You still didn't learn from your past, did you? You have to understand that only strength reigns supreme in this world. You don't want to regret what happened to your grandchildren to John as well, right? Do you think I don't know why you came here leaving your position as a court official and look after Eva?" After listening to him, Melanie's face changed. Though she understood what he said was right, she still sneered to him. "And at what cost? You yourself should know about the numerous enemies you have made all these years. You think those guys at the capital would stay calm after learning that you took him as one of your disciples? Additionally, I don't think you are one of the guys who will take a disciple so easily or even help people if you don't see a benefit for yourself and the Blucia family." Hearing this, Vlad laughed, took out some documents and gave it to her while he spoke at the same time. "You think they aren't planning to move on him already? Take a look at this and you will understand. As for me helping him, very rarely do I find people interesting, and my instinct tells me he will become big later on and help our family from grave danger in times of need. So you can think of me as investing in him early on, and as you changed over time, I too changed over the years when it comes to judging people. What I liked the most about him was his reflexes and the ability to sense me even from a relaxed position. He is a natural as an assassin and perfect at detecting enemies. I think he can become a great fighter and a better assassin. You might not know, but he already beat Francis Mendez's son Antonio in East Sea City. You would probably know why they dueled, don't you? He smiled and didn't finish. As for my enemies, what about them? I have buried most of my enemies under the earth, and if there remain any, they too will face the same fate as my previous enemies. I am not one of those who likes to keep loose ends. As for those guys at court, what can they do if they don't know? Haven't you already understood how the imperial court works? After looking at the documents provided by Vlad, she spoke in a grave manner. Why would a small soap factory attract so much attention from all these nobles and royal family? Vlad smiled and gave her the answer. The answer to it is that they are good, different from other soaps and quite unique in itself, and the most important thing is they have harmed the interests of a lot of nobles, and there are some who are very interested in taking it to earn more profits as well. You have to understand that only strength reigns supreme, so what is your decision this time? Meanwhile, I ain't charging anything this time like the last time around when you were in a problem. I know you didn't take action last time because of the internal conflict in your family and you feared Eva's life, but remember, even if you don't want to get involved in politics, politics is very interested in getting involved with you and people around you. The most you can do is strengthen yourself and the people around you. And I found John quite naive in the sense that he bought this town but not enough knights and slaves to protect his fief, but you don't have to worry for now. However, I will only help him in grave circumstances so that he can understand the importance of strength. If he has any other plans which even I am not aware of, then that would be even more better. However, his resolve to protect this town is quite admirable, and this is one of the reasons why I took an interest in him and decided to invest in him. So you can take this as one of the reasons why I intend to help him. She furrowed her brows when she heard that John earned enough to buy this town. From this, she also understood that John's soaps were quite unique since they got sold instantly after some period, and he earned enough to buy this town within a month. She thought on John. It seems this creation of his is a lot of trouble for us this time around. As expected from my disciple. However, she wasn't surprised by him, as she had already experienced how John modified and improved a lot of her formulas on potions as well, or his theory on the soil improvement. Melanie sighed at the current dilemma and decided to accept the facts over her emotions of the past and gave her answer to Vlad. In her heart, she was quite glad that John got Vlad as one of his backers, and from the rumors she understood his instincts were quite good when it to judging people or judging situations. Chapter 48. Meanwhile, in a certain mansion in the western part of Elias' kingdom was a man with brown curly hair and royal clothes sitting on a chair. He wasn't tall compared to other people. He was 5 feet and 7.5 inches, he had sharp eyes and he had a slight stubble on his face. By all means, he looked quite handsome. He had a physique of a strong man and he gave an aura of oppression when people met him. He had quite a bad reputation among all the circles, whether it was the nobles or commoners. He was very well known for his cruelty to his enemies. The name of the man sitting the chair was Lukov Elias. He was the second prince of the kingdom and was known to be as cunning as a fox in the noble circles. He was also under house arrest 7 years ago under the personal orders of the king. At that time he created quite a big scandal that was even known among the masses. The rumor was that he caused a lot of deaths of nobles and commoners 7 years ago. The day this massacre happened was very widely known as the New Year incident of Red Lake City. At this time he was drinking wine and reading one of the reports provided by his butler. This man followed Prince Lukov from a young age. He was his most trusted and loyal follower. He was a man with white hair, a normal physique, and his eyes reflected his experiences of the past. His name was Duncan. While reading one of the reports he asked his butler, "Since Hector is planning such a big banquet, I don't think it would be a normal socializing event, so what is Hector planning this time around?" From the reports, he is planning this banquet to introduce new nobles and businessmen as well as making some plans for his future. We are not sure about the accurate details, but from my personal point of view, he is going to make his future plans with other aristocrats when they will meet at the banquet, as it will last for 5 days. However, from the recent reports, we got information that one of his men was quite humiliated in an auction a few days ago by a new merchant. Apparently, that merchant is also the producer of new soaps we got into the market recently. Judging by Hector's petty temperament, I am sure he will try to take his revenge from him immediately. Quite the opposite this time around, he is remaining cautious this time, as Marquis Ray, Morgan family, and Duke of Southern Forest are backing that merchant and have interests in the soaps produced by him, as they are one of the main suppliers of that soap in the market. However, as you think, I think he will try to find a roundabout way to seek face for his humiliation at the auction. Most probably he will plan for that in the next banquet as well. Currently, that merchant lives in the northern domain at North Frontier Town and is a disciple of Grand Vlad and Melanie. He also bought a fief of North Frontier Town from the proceeds of his new soaps from Baron Mendez. Lookoff laughed and said to Duncan, "This merchant is quite interesting to have made a connection with so many nobles in a short period of time, and he also managed to antagonize Hector. What is His Majesty's position on the issue?" "Well, he has said to keep a neutral position to his followers for now, but as you know, they will try to take any advantage if they get a chance, so the neutral position is most likely a ruse and they will do as the situation follows." When it came to important matters, Lookoff said in a very serious tone to Duncan, "As for the important matters, is there any new news on Felix?" "No, as far as the latest information is concerned, he is still cooped up in the military camp and busy preparing for the war next year and heavily training every day with his men so he can gain something from the war. But this time, Duke Black Wolf from the west is making some movements towards the merchant who pissed off Hector. It seems it is because of the high-end market of soaps which is being captured by that merchant, but I am not sure about his movements, if they are related to him or is he planning something else." This time Duncan replied in a very serious manner. Lookoff made his conclusion, "Most likely Duke Southern Forest and Black Wolf will have a go at each other's throats, and this is also the most likely the reason why he backed that merchant. Meanwhile, keep a watch on that merchant and North Frontier Town. Since he is not afraid to confront Hector and other nobles, he should be worthy enough to keep a watch on him. Anyways, our position will be to be on good terms with him, send him a gift and congratulations on owning a fief to him, and make it public. It should annoy all those assholes in the imperial capital. And since he is a disciple of that old ghost, then it would be a benefit for us in the long run, and he must be quite capable to become her disciple. This would also explain how he managed to make such better soaps." "Okay, Master, your orders will be followed as instructed. Do we attend today's meeting in the evening with that Marquis Evan?" "Master, how do we deal with that spy who was caught recently?" "We will attend, make preparations for the carriage, we will head there immediately. As for that traitor, execute him, make him feel as much pain as possible, and like always make an example out of him in front of everyone so that people think twice before joining us and think more doubly before becoming traitors in our faction. And kill anyone who opposes this execution." Lookoff concluded his reports and headed inside to prepare for one of his meetings with Marquis Evan. Duncan sighed a bit, but he still followed his orders to the point. During this time, John and others set off for North Frontier Town. After getting the deed, John was now going to aggressively bring in a lot of new technologies which he was hesitant about in the past few days. He already understood that he needed people whom he can trust, and he also needed to be strong enough if he wished to protect himself and his friends, and this was also one of the reasons why he trusted men under him so he can judge them early on. Their return journey this time was quite peaceful compared to their journey when they headed south. Maybe one of the reasons was because Knights of Marquis were escorting them on their return journey, and hence they never faced bandits on the road or problems when they crossed the borders of various nobles. Chapter 49. During this time, John and others set off for North Frontier Town. After getting the deed, John was now going to aggressively bring in a lot of new technologies which he was hesitant about in the past few days. He already understood that he needed people whom he can trust, and he also needed to be strong enough if he wished to protect himself and his friends, and this was also one of the reasons why he trusted men under him so he can judge them early on. Their return journey this time was quite peaceful compared to their journey when they headed south. maybe one of the reasons was because knights of Marquis were escorting them on their return journey and hence they never faced bandits on the road or problems when they crossed the borders of various nobles. In the North Frontier town, Vlad met with all the slaves who were bought by John. Eric had settled all the slaves in the North Frontier town. After meeting the slaves, he could see that all the slaves showing rays of hope. It was unlike the usual slaves where they displayed no hope who were normally bought by merchants and nobles likewise. After this encounter, he understood that John was going to treat his slaves differently from how other nobles and merchants treated them. John to him appeared like a unique star standing out in the night sky which was different from others. He possessed fearlessness when it came to take action for sticking up to his values. However, Vlad still wondered, for how long would John stick to values when he would have to choose between two evils in the future? Unlike the slaves who never showed any positive emotions, he could clearly see those emotions from the slaves under John. Among the slaves, he could also see one guy who very different from all the slaves present. It was Jake who was training alone, who had an expression of hope, determination, and tenacity. Unlike the past where he was in disbelief, now he could see a way and hope where he could nullify the wrong he did to his family. This event was also one of the knots which bind his heart. After asking Eric, he understood his situation and decided not to bother him for now and headed to the mansion and report the recent happenings of the day to Diana. After a whole day of traveling, the whole group returned to the North Frontier city. Their return caused quite a stir among the people in the North Frontier city as there were knights who were escorting them. Mayor Sam was already informed during the day about the transfer of ownership of land from Baron Mendez to John via a letter. So during this commotion, he informed everyone of the transfer of ownership of land to the people. People also didn't know how to react, but a lot of people were quite happy and cheered about the transfer. It may be because many were farmers who benefited a lot from John's proposal in farms, and many were ones who were benefited from John's soap factory. After the construction of his factory, the volume of people who came to the North Frontier town had increased a lot as well. The same was the case with merchants, and so people didn't have to stock up on necessities and give exorbitant prices like they usually did. Looking at the commotion, John decided to speak in front of everyone. I know that many of you might be confused and wouldn't know how to react on this current situation, however there is still good news for you guys. From now I have decided that all the taxes on the yields will be reduced to the minimum 65% of the kingdom, and in times of need I, as the Baron, as one of your comrades from this land, will do my best if the town faces danger in any form. Previously, before I owned North Frontier Town, I had already asked Mayor Sam about the problems of our town faced, and hence I had first decided to buy the town first. This time as well I have decided to use my money if the town faces any problem when it comes to food. For this situation, I have also decided to construct various big granaries in the town. Mayor Sam will remain the mayor. As for the knights which you might be worrying about, they came from Marquis Ray's dominion and they will help us train more people in knight training for the protection of this town. After listening to John's spellbound speech, many people were happy, with the most important being the reduction in taxes, as it would help them lessen their burden. Unlike the past where nobles usually squeezed most from the masses, it was different for John. If it was in full control of John, then he would have reduced the taxes like the modern times of Earth. However, he didn't want to bring more unwanted attention from aristocrats towards him, as this decision would practically mean that he was challenging all the nobles of Elias' kingdom. However, this didn't mean that he did not have other ways to improve the situation of people under his rule, and he had decided that when he got stronger he wouldn't care about them and simply reduce the taxes without giving two hoots to the nobles. Mayor Sam was very happy with the change in ownership of the land because he already knew about the monster attack and Baron's plan to abandon North Frontier Town if an invasion of magical monsters took place. However, also he understood that Baron Mendez intended to defend his dominion from a better geographical area rather than defend from North Frontier Town. However, he still felt that Baron should have informed the people of North Frontier Town if he intended to abandon this place, so people would be more prepared in case of an emergency. Meanwhile, the folks in the town were continuously talking about the incidents John did which helped them previously. Chapter 50. One of the villagers spoke to one of his friends, I believe John will be a better baron for us at North Frontier Town, and since he is Grandma Melanie's disciple, I am sure he will improve and help our town just like how Grandma Melanie helped us at times of need when we were in need of medicine but we were short of it." Another guy added, "That's true, even my father was full of praise for John. According to him, John was the one who solved the problem of barren lands in the town and a lot of work for this year." It was also confirmed by Chief Sam and all the representatives who attended the meeting last month for the problem of farms. A third guy added, "Plus he has also prioritized in hiring people of our village, and this has solved the problems of unemployment in the town. My elder brother already works in his rose soap factory, and from what I know, the pay and incentives there are too good. When John recruits next month for his factory, I am already applying and join up with my brother. The unemployment over the years has caused many of our mates from the village to migrate to cities where they can find work, and this is also one of the reasons why our town never populated after a certain point." One of the guys added with a depressed tone, "Yeah, many of them got slaved in cities due to high debts." To console his buddy, one of the guys added, "However, his actions prove that he has the best of interests of our village. He has already reduced the taxes to the minimum in our kingdom. It will be very helpful to all the villagers, and this might make all the villagers who left the village come back. If anyone leaves the village for travel and meets an acquaintance from the past, they should at least be made aware of the current situation in the village, and we can help them free up from their slavery if we earn enough. However, convincing them to come back will be hard since many don't like our borders, as it is always unsafe against monsters. However, we can still try and to do our best and persuade them. It is still better than nothing when Baron never protected our village. It was always us who funded and defended the territory for our lives, meanwhile he only squeezed us for our taxes. Your words hold true, it's better than that Baron defending us, and since the village chief and other leaders are in support of John, then there won't be any problems with others as well." A lot of people heard the conversation between these young men, and many could even relate themselves from the events they were speaking, and hence they choose to believe the leaders of the village. Later on, the commotion in the village was settled. After all the commotion was settled, everyone arrived at John's mansion to discuss the future plans and on how to tackle future problems. Arriving at the mansion, John was quite surprised to see Vlad's and Diana's. Eric then arrived and explained it to both Joseph and John, who later understood the reason for their presence. Eric was already waiting for them for a few days after he arrived at North Frontier Town. Today Tornwall was accompanied by Eric. Eric already had orders from Joseph previously to accompany Tornwall to John's mansion because he would be one of the main characters during the meeting after everyone gathered. Eric was already informed by Joseph that Tornwall would be one of the main engineers who will lead the industrial base of the North Frontier under John, and hence the treatment. Everyone first decided to head towards the biggest hall in the mansion and have a meeting there. John started the meeting with a short speech in the hall. "As you might all know, I have already bought the North Frontier. However, our problems still remain and we will have to tackle them efficiently from now on. I first want to hear from you guys that how do we deal with beast invasion, which will be around the corner during this winter." It was Jay who first proposed. "Objectively speaking, we lack men, and more importantly trained men. However, we still have 5 months before winter, so buying more slaves and giving them basic training can at least help us better prepare against the invasion." Mayor Sam proposed, "Why don't we hire mercenaries for this one job? If we pay them high enough, they would do any bidding for us." Tornwall furrowed his brows when he heard the idea of hiring mercenaries because of his gruesome past. However, he still didn't object in front of John for now. Joseph rejected this idea and gave his own opinion on the idea of hiring mercenaries. "I object. Hiring those mercenaries is easy, but getting rid of them is harder if they smell any money here." Additionally, many people in this room might not know of the relation of mercenaries to various nobles. There are even various mercenary groups which are directly controlled by nobles, so hiring them would be more riskier, as it would practically invite a pack of wolves into our house, which would be more problematic for us. Meanwhile, Vlad and Diana were watching the whole commotion taking place from the sidelines. They had no plans to interfere in this meeting or give any suggestions to them, as it was their internal matter and it would be very rude to doubt their abilities unless they choose to ask their help. Eva said to John, maybe I can ask my friends from Imperial Capital to help us this time, they could be very useful to us as there are a lot of magicians. After hearing the opinions of everyone, John concluded and said, I know what you all are thinking right now. I would have thought the same, since I know we don't have enough soldiers to protect our borders, so this time I wanted to show you guys one of my finest blueprints. This is a blueprint of a ballista cross and a catapult that I have personally designed, and it can be started for production after the forge is built in the town, so this time our main focus would be on building the forge and then produce ballista crossbow. Meanwhile, we can already start the production of catapults. The main focus of you guys will be to train slaves and warriors in archery, and Jay will be one of the main instructors of archery.